What's that? Yeah. Everything's there. I tell you, I enjoy the other music you're listening to. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Questions You Never Thought You Could Ask in Church. Apologizing for our segue music right off the bat. You know, we've been talking about rebranding the show for a while, and we were really digging what you were playing on 21.6 Net here. And, then it rolled.
What do you think about this?
Yeah.
Hey, here's the test. Here's the test. See, I'm liking that more.
Yeah, but this is for someone else now.
Well, it is, but we can find something.
Change your note, Steve. Change your note in there.
Well, let's do the Inner Sandman.
Because that's not proprietary, right?
Who cares?
That got us kicked off from Facebook.
Yeah, but we're not on Facebook. Well, we are. I mean, we are, though.
Yeah. No, we literally are. We are on Facebook and all of your favorite podcast providers. Anyway, my name is Dave Godini here in studio today with Kent Jones producing, Steve Wells and Andrew Metcalf. This is the podcast where we invite you to text in questions that you have. Things that you're wrestling with, struggling with, coming up against, don't really know where to turn on, maybe afraid to ask and don't know where to ask to begin with. Questions specifically relating to God, Christianity, how it compares to other belief systems, religions, and worldviews. How to put it into play, questions of spirituality, questions of life application, questions of how to navigate the Bible, questions of Jesus and everything in between, maybe even just questions about your local practice and why they do what they do and how to make sense of it all. You can text your questions in to 815-314-0363. Again, 815-314-0363. If you're with us on Facebook, you can post your questions right in the comments. Facebook connect through fellowshipoffaith.org or 216thenet. You know, right before we came on today, we realized Andrew has never heard of the nuclear clock.
No.
Andrew's giving a prediction here that in 24 months it's all going to be gone, right? That's what you're saying for max time, right?
For me, at least. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a survivalist, so I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I think people would be curious to know from what.
I was not a Boy Scout, so
no.
And that's going to be the end of it right there. Who's ever been a Boy
end?
Scout, you know, they're surviving the
Boy
nuclear.
Scouts and Girl Scouts of America, they're taking over.
So what happens? What's the day look like?
The
end? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'm saying that's the furthest we can make it.
That's the furthest. So it could okay.
I think
So
before then,
we're going to mark this April 5th, 2023. And we got to see if we're still here having the show on April 5th, 2025. All right. And and I think you need to put stakes on this, Andrew. All right. What happens if we are still here 2 years from today and this has not come true?
Oh man.
Lunch for us.
Lunch for us and singing for you.
Right after the show.
Definitely some pies. Those little pies were
okay.
delicious.
Little pies. But
I'll bring pie for everybody.
But see, the pies aren't going to benefit our listeners here. I mean, what are you going to bring them in this?
Nothing.
An original piece, a song.
New music.
We'll have
new intro music then.
No, but you know, so the nuclear clock, it actually came out of the late 40s, right after U.S. dropped the two. Thanks, Kent. Right after U.S. dropped the two bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and basically it was a bunch of think tank people who got together trying to estimate the danger factor in the world of nuclear holocaust. And midnight is nuclear war, so they time midnight. Yeah, so they time everything to midnight, and the farther you are from midnight, the safer they're arguing the world is at that point. So we looked it up. We are 90 seconds to midnight right now, which sounds really, really like, oh my gosh. But I think it's always within like 2 minutes of midnight. Kent, do you know, has it ever been less than or more than 2 minutes away from midnight since 1948?
No, not that I'm aware.
Okay.
So this is basically like a level, like, are we level 3, level 4, level 5? That's kind of the
you got
they're
it.
using time.
You got it.
Okay,
yeah.
That makes more sense then.
Yeah. So
I've
if you're
heard
like
the 2 minutes to midnight before.
Yeah, and if you're like 8
phrase.
seconds to midnight, then like, oh my gosh. If you're 1 second to midnight, really, oh my gosh. If you're like 0.08 seconds to midnight, you know, I mean, I don't know how far they'll parse this thing down, but
Gotcha. I thought you meant like today actually was like the day
in 90
at
seconds.
Midnight. Yeah.
No. So
why would they use time to that's the wrong meter, like metric meter. What is that?
measurement.
It's the wrong measurement because time is already a thing. You should say like we're 50% there.
Guys.
I know.
I don't know. Time doesn't work.
Andrew's not buying this thing.
So,
yeah.
so the question then would be, though, if that's the case, well, let's just say that 2 years, like you give it 24 months, but also hypothetically, what if we knew the exact day that Jesus was coming,
Mhm.
right? So my question then would be, how different would your life be at this point or in the months to come? Like, let's say Jesus comes in 24 months.
Mhm.
What does that do to you?
Mhm.
Quitting my job at the church for
Are you-
sure.
Leaving those suckers behind. Yeah, forget them. Well, I
Because
think
there's nothing about that work that would be honoring to you,
I
Lord
know,
Christ.
I
you
know, right?
I'm gonna get mine. Forget- but I mean, people who are diagnosed with cancer say you got less than 6 months to
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
They go out and do things they do the bucket list and so
Yeah.
I would guess if that was the case, that's how I would live. Like, oh, all right, giddy up.
It's funny though, because a lot of people I think have the opposite kind of impression. They'd be like, "Oh, I got to clean my life up,"
Yeah.
because I'm going to be Christ, so I better be, I better be squeaky clean when he comes. And we're just like, no, Andrew's doing his bucket list, Ken's doing his bucket list, Steve's moved to New Orleans.
Bye. I need
Dave-
beads.
Dave's running Holy Week by himself. Anyone?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We get a little
the
help
COVID
here.
Holy Week.
Right.
Empty
Yeah, right.
building, very strange.
Right.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. And I know every one of us knows and maybe are one a procrastinator to the point to where it's like they probably wouldn't change a thing until like 4 hours till
Yeah,
it
right,
became, just to
right.
make sure you have time to get things in line.
Yeah.
Okay, am I saved? Am
Yeah.
I saved?
I
Am
mean, think of
saved?
every homework assignment you've ever had, or
Right.
even work assignment, right? It's this date. You start that morning or the night before.
Yeah, but
My philosophy was if I only have 2 hours to write this paper, it'll only take 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if I started it 2 weeks ago, it would have taken, I
2
could have put
weeks.
10
You
hours
just
into
fill
it,
the time.
and
Yeah.
I still got A's, so it worked.
hey, the thief on the cross walked into paradise with Christ. He was a thief. He wasn't baptized, didn't get confirmed, did none of it. And so he just believed, gave him faith, right? I guess.
Not that we're necessarily recommending that.
Yeah, don't go out stealing stuff.
No, Andrew, I would say I am recommending faith. I actually think that is a good thing,
I meant last minute.
Yeah, don't just go out stealing stuff.
Yeah, right. Here, work for him.
That's the way to Jesus.
Well, you have to have something to repent from for, right? So like live it up.
Isn't
I mean,
that
you don't want to
isn't
feel
that a
pretentious
Paul
at
thing?
Judgment Day, right?
Do you watch many of these shows on this station? I've got a lot to
Does that mean
repent
we should
for.
sin all the more? And
Yes,
Paul says by no
because-
means. Isn't
Yes, because your forgiveness means more the more you sin.
Oh,
You see,
I see.
that's my motto.
We're going to run a
That's
segment on
it.
the show called Bad Advice from Steve. It just
So I get a tattoo called Faith Life.
Well, I got that because we were talking earlier in the green room, and that's what Dave was saying. That's how he lives his life.
The more
I'm
for-
just
the more
spewing words
forgiveness.
of what came out of your mouth.
Yeah,
earlier. As we
of
were
course,
eating pies and stuff in the green room.
No, but I think end of the world definitely nukes are involved and AI is involved for
Mm.
sure.
So you really have the Terminator kind of ending.
I don't know that. I don't think there'll be a physical representation of AI. I think it's just going to cripple the infrastructure.
Okay.
think
Everything
you're
is connected to the internet. Everything is controlled by computers.
Okay.
You'll see
Yeah.
Trump and Putin riding bareback, shirtless.
It'd be Xi Jinping,
Xi Jinping.
and Putin, and North Korea
That's
and Iran.
Well, we hate to break this to you on today's show, but we do make mistakes every now and then.
What?
And I know it's kind of unprecedented.
What?
But we have I'd call it a question. It's really more of a comment coming off probably last week's show.
We
Let me
got
just read this
fact-checked.
here. We got fact checked,
checked.
and we go on record right now.
Wow.
We apologize for leading you astray on this point last week. But here's what it says. This is my understanding of what David Lee Roth would request at every concert. He would ask for a bowl of M&Ms with all the red ones removed. The first thing he would do upon arriving at a new concert site is go into his dressing room and look in the bowl. When he saw the detail of no red ones, he would be confident every other aspect and all the other details of the concert preparation were correct. It wasn't Sammy Hagar of Van Halen, but David Lee Roth. Well, we have not had a chance to fact check this kind of correction on the show, but since we're not going to, if we led you astray, we our apologies to Sammy Hagar.
Right.
If we mischaracterized you
here's
here.
what I think we
he
should
was
do.
also in Van Halen.
He was in Van
So
Halen.
we had the band right.
We had the band right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Did we
Well,
have
he's down in Mexico, right? Sammy Hagar.
Yeah.
Sammy Hagar,
Yeah.
if you
So
say so. I don't know.
I'm gonna propose something that we probably should apologize in person.
We should. Yeah.
So
I'll see if I can expense those.
Can you? Yeah. Could
Let
you?
me see if the
make that
station
happen?
can take care of that.
nice.
All right. All right.
Since it happened
Thank
here.
you, Ken.
Since it
Thank
happened
you.
here.
That's good of you.
He's always got our back.
He does. He
He's
does.
amazing.
If we're at the station, you might be getting on mine for that trip.
Yeah. Well, Jesus came riding in on a donkey.
Boy, as my wife called me, never mind.
I think we should have a completely off the wherever we're going right now, which I have no idea.
we're off the beaten path.
We
for
need to
sure.
have a questions you never thought your pastor would ask.
Okay, so I've got to come up with the
Right.
questions and air like my deep, dark, dirty
Yeah,
questions or
right.
something like that.
Yeah.
All
Steve
right.
and I will answer
From
them.
the
And then you
Yeah.
and Steve answer them. Yeah.
And then
yeah.
we'll just make fun of you.
Oh, okay, that works too.
That was stupid.
How many
Oh my
times-
gosh, why would you even ask that question?
How many times are you going to get up and go to the bathroom
Yeah.
during my sermon?
You could keep a tally.
I could keep a tally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
I bet you've got some questions.
I've got some
Probably
questions.
questions that we wouldn't expect either.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we will leave you in
Can't wait to hear
suspense
'em.
on those for a
Can't wait to hear
themed show of
That's
Steve's
right.
Desire.
I know I don't know if this is your question, but I know all of your kids have said this before about the writing in the sand,
Yeah.
Jesus. So I don't know if that came from you and that has been passed down.
I don't
them.
know. I don't
They're
know.
always like, that's what I would ask.
I thought you were
my
talking
Ken's
about my
actually got a
kids.
great.
Yeah.
No.
What was the question?
when they're trying to stone the woman caught in adultery and
Yeah.
Jesus writes in the sand.
Yeah.
Like, what did he write?
I think we talked about it once, but it
Yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't matter because
I agree.
The commandments are written.
No, but here's why
with
it's
the
cool
finger
in the
of God,
story.
right? So when he wrote, they saw the finger of God write, which was the law, and that's where they go,
Gotcha.
"Oh boy."
So it wasn't what he wrote, it was how he wrote it.
Yeah.
See, I didn't hear
What
it
is
that way.
happening by his act of writing
Right.
might be what the story is about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I heard he was just zoning out and really just kind of doodling.
It's kind of like an etch sketch.
Oh, hey, did you say something?
Playing hangman.
Oh.
Anyway.
Yeah.
because we all make Jesus like kind of a projection of ourselves, right? It's like
Right.
that's what I would be doing.
Right.
So
The crowd just got bored and left.
Right.
honestly.
yeah.
We have butchered so many Bible stories today.
Well, we're testing the audience to see if they actually are on their game.
It is halftime of Holy Week, though.
It is
Wednesday,
halftime of Holy
right?
Week. We are coming in. So
Well,
for those of you not of the Christian background,
And the
and
first quarter.
the Christian tradition, tomorrow's a holiday called Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday, depending on your flavor. Good Friday is this Friday. We go into Holy Saturday, actually. Some churches will practice that. And then Easter Sunday. Basically, it commemorates a week. It's the week that changed history. It's the week that Jesus came into Jerusalem. You can read about this in all four Gospels. And all the events unfolded that led to his death and resurrection. It all happened in an 8-day period from Palm Sunday from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. And Christians around the world are celebrating this right now in various kinds of ways, remembering these days, kind of rooting themselves in what Jesus did for us on those days. We actually have some questions relating to some of these holidays. They come around this time of year all the time. Should we jump in?
Yeah.
All right. What do we got here in the
I don't
inbox
know.
today?
I'm looking at this first one. It's not specifically about Easter, but I think it can relate. We'll make it relate. I've always thought of the Gospels as eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life. Matthew, Mark, and John were disciples of Jesus, correct? But what about Luke? Did he ever meet Jesus? If not, is his gospel account as credible?
Yeah, great question. And I think a lot of these questions about which the credibility of the Bible and is it trustworthy, and are certain parts more trustworthy than others? I mean, they're fantastic questions. Thanks for asking. So a little bit of clarification here. Matthew and John were disciples of Jesus in the strict sense of, I think, which this question asker is proposing, meaning eyewitness followers of Jesus. Mark was not. Mark may have been a follower of Jesus, but not one of the 12 in the way people typically think. He may have been numbered among the 72 or had some other kind of FaceTime with Jesus that we can get to in a little bit. Luke was not either. Luke was actually a traveling companion of the Apostle Paul. And basically, from the earliest historic records that we have on the sources of the gospel, Mark was actually more of a scribe for Peter, believe it or not. And Mark is really recording Peter's account of what happened, if these early sources are to be believed. So half of them certainly are coming from eyewitness followers. The other half, not arguably. There is some speculation that Mark may have wrote himself into his own gospel at the Garden of Gethsemane. You know, we're talking Monday, Thursday. This is where Jesus goes to pray because he's always going to be arrested, and the guards come to arrest him. And when they do, all his disciples flee. And Mark includes this one little detail that there's this young man who the guards kind of take hold of, and he slips out of his like cloak and his clothes, and it says he flees naked, you know, kind of rips himself out of them trying to grab him. None of the other gospels have this. And there's some speculation that that's like Mark, IDing himself in the story. Maybe, who knows? But when it comes to credibility, I don't think you need to base this on eyewitness testimony. And let me just kind of frame this by something that's kind of a no-brainer that I think people will identify with today. Think of how many autobiographies are written, but how many of those autobiographies are written actually by a biographer? So the biographer sitting with the person who's telling the story, and then they are compiling it. Likewise, think of how many autobiographies are limited in their perspective because it's coming solely from that person's vantage point, as opposed to other biographies that are done where the person is collecting multiple sources and multiple points of data, not just the eyewitness. Well, Luke is very forward on this, going, I have gone about, because there's a lot of accounts out there, collecting the best eyewitness sources and the best accounts out there. And so you get more of that historian biographer thing through Luke, which I think has just as much credibility as a singular eyewitness source. And likewise to the rest. So I wouldn't pit the Gospels against each other in terms of credibility. From the earliest days, the first Christians saw them as being the authoritative accounts of what Jesus did. Even though there is discrepancies at times between the Gospels, they held each four of them to be so valuable and to be so credible that they would rather adopt all four with the discrepancies than try to pit them against each other. So yeah, Luke is strong. Hang on to him.
You said Vantage Point, and that reminded me. There's a movie called Vantage Point that came out in 2008, and it's very good. But it's that whole concept. They tell the story from one point of view, and then shift to another point of view, and then shift to another point of view.
Cool.
And that's how you finally figure out what's happening.
Okay.
So if you need a movie to watch,
Vantage Point.
Dennis Quaid.
Dennis Quaid. Vantage Point. Yeah. All right.
You know what you should do? You
Nothing
should
to do with anything.
You should have mark one day of whenever you want to choose with your family, with your immediate family.
So like April 5th of 2025.
Tina and the kids, right?
Okay.
And they should write their own gospels about you.
Okay.
For the day. And
Okay.
just see how different they come out the next day when you read them.
Yeah.
Be kind of interesting.
Yeah, it would be.
It would be your entire life, or just that?
No, just the day.
Oh, okay.
It's a short little thing.
Yeah,
It's a
because no one wants to
practice.
devote that much time to it.
I was like, I don't know if you
Because
could write that in a day.
They honestly don't care that much.
Yeah, right. No, but I'm with you, because it would be fascinating to see how you get very different perspectives on different episodes, or even different perspectives on the same event. And that's certainly what you see in the Gospels.
We should have done that for our pilgrimage.
How would you have done it? What do you mean?
I'm just saying, like, we could have told everyone, like, okay, now that it's over, write down what your experience was.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
That would have been cool, and kind of make like a...
Because we kind of got one. You read it to us.
Yeah.
And that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
So
So what we do at Fellowship of Faith is we have a pilgrimage every year on Palm Sunday. And what we mean by that is we just encourage people to walk to church. Certainly it pales in comparisons to some of the great pilgrimages people have done through history, but it's our way of like kind of taste testing it, so to speak, and trying to revive the memory at least of a biblical practice. And it's become like this huge thing at our church where some people really like embrace it hardcore. Some walking throughout the night, 10s, 20s of miles, things like that. And we just had it this past Sunday. Yeah. Good stuff. All right.
Someone, I don't know who, someone was saying that Easter began as a pagan holiday and that it's named after some goddess. I've heard stuff like this before, and it always shakes me a little bit. Is it true?
Great question. This comes up every single Easter, especially if you watch something on like the History Channel or Discovery, or you read like what Time or Newsweek or those kinds of publications are putting out there. There's always going to be like the secret story behind Easter, and we're like the true life expose thing that we're going to debunk it or something like that. So great question. Thanks for asking. I understand that this often shakes people the first time they hear it, and you don't have to be shaken. Let me give you some explanation of what's being said and why it doesn't matter. So there is an Anglo-Saxon goddess, and I never know how to pronounce these Anglo-Saxon words correctly, but it's her name would be pronounced something like Eostray or Eorstay or something like that, like E-O umlaut double schwa, whatever, S-T-R-E with a bunch of squigglies. You can look it up and see it, something like that.
Yeah.
But you get like Eorstay or something like that. No, this isn't fabricated. There's a monk named Bede from the 7th and 8th century AD. When you think in the monastic era in the Middle Ages, they're keeping Christianity alive. And I forget if he's coming out of Gaul or if he's coming out of probably the British Isles, obviously. And he writes about this and how the local people are worshiping this goddess, part of their pagan rituals, named Eorstray. And there's similarity in paganism in all belief systems. And I'll share where the name you can find in other belief systems. Ishtar is an Egyptian goddess. Ashtoreth is a Canaanite goddess. You'll often find Ashtoreth in the Bible, the consort of Baal. And you'll find her popping up in other belief systems, and she's basically like a fertility goddess. So there's a lot of spring worship going on around her and stuff like that. And the accusation is made that what Easter is doing is nothing more than taking this pagan holiday and turning it into their own resurrection myth. Here's the fundamental problem with it. No one in the early church called it Easter. We didn't start calling it Easter till like 1000 AD. So the first 10 centuries, this wasn't even on the grid. Easter really isn't even called Easter in liturgical churches, if you get into it. We call it Easter in just kind of a casual way because that's how people identify with it. But if you get into like the church and the history and the liturgical practice today, they don't call it Easter. They call it Resurrection Day, or they call it the Paschal Feast. And that's what the original Christians called it. They called it Pascha. Pascha is a derivative of Pesach. And Pesach is how you say Passover, or what we interpret as the holiday of Passover in Hebrew, right? So Pesach, you could hear Pascha come out of it. They would call it the Paschal Feast. And they would call it that because Easter is intimately tied up with Passover. It's dating its occurrence and the entire thing. Your church would just celebrate the Paschal Feast. We're here to celebrate Jesus' betrayal, death, and resurrection that roots itself to Passover. Any import of the word Easter is something that came much, much later. And it's arguable that it takes its name from this pagan goddess. But even if it does, this is the same thing Christians did with Christmas, adopting December 25th as the day they would celebrate Jesus' birth, but it had nothing to do with the pagan understanding of the day. It was arguably at most just taking a day people were already celebrating and repackaging it or baptizing it, going, no, let's not make this day about the worship of this goddess. Let's instead make this day about the worship of Jesus Christ, who brings true life and not the false pagan promise of life. But even if we were to go down that path, that's even difficult in itself, because a lot of other people go, we don't think that it's coming from that at all. By the way, that theory, I find this stuff interesting, was popularized by, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, the Grimm brothers, like Grimm fairy tales. Yeah. Well, they were, everyone thinks that they were fairy tale writers. They're not. They were linguists. And what they were doing was trying to collect the old folklore and tales and language of the early Anglo-Saxon and early Germanic and Teutonic writings specifically as a way of preserving old language forms. A lot of other people look at the Old Teutonic and go, we don't think it should go that way. We think it actually relates to a different Old Teutonic word, and that Old Teutonic word is Esther, E-S-T-E-R. And Esther in Old German or Teutonic is how you would say first. And there was a day or a word that they had that was Esther stehen, which meant the first standing or the first rising. And over time, it became, in today's German, more or less the word for resurrection. And so it might actually be deriving its meaning from that and nothing to do with the pagan goddess at all. So why do I give you all these details? For one specific reason. Because you said, I've heard stuff like this before, and it always shakes me a bit. And what I have found is that people get shaken when they don't know the facts. And if you know the facts, what people accuse or insinuate becomes far less scary because they give you one possible fact and start creating an entire worldview around it. And you're just like, well, I don't even know how to respond to this. Well, a lot of people choose to respond by sticking their head in the sands and ignoring stuff like that and just going, I believe, I believe, I believe. I've never found that satisfactory in my own faith life. And that's why I do a show like this, is because there are a lot of things circulating out there that sounds scary or that are confusing or that people are insinuating, and you just don't have to be afraid by them if you drill down and learn what's really going on. So hopefully that helps you, and hopefully it keeps you grounded in what Easter has always been about, the resurrection of Jesus.
And the eggs. Right. Well, because while you were going through that whole story, I was really trying to tie the two together in my mind. And I'm thinking, here's a hypothetical, right? So Jesus goes to the cross. They bury him, or they put him in the tomb. And he's thinking, because he's God, so he's already been there. And he sees what the future holds, right? So he's thinking, okay, there's going to be eggs and candy in the future that come from a bunny. And so he's probably, here's how I think it actually went, is that, so when he then went to heaven and the resurrection happened, he was like, I don't want it to be mistaken that someone just took me out of here, because, they could have, right? They could have rolled the tomb away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a bunny in the tomb. And in that bunny, the bunny's going to lay an egg, and inside that egg's going to have candy. And they're probably going to think to themselves, like, there would have been no one else that could have done this but the God of everything. No one else could have gotten away with that, right?
So this was underneath like the burial cloth?
Yeah,
there was a bunny.
There's correct,
bunny, okay.
Right? A bunny there with an egg there with treats inside of it. There you go.
That's
where my mind went.
Fascinating. All
It's
right,
a
journey into
theory.
Steve's mind here. Yeah.
What was the egg made out of, though? Because plastic didn't exist yet.
It
it's
could
like
have been a real egg.
And that's
Coming from a
why
bunny.
Even more,
and that's
incredible,
why
I suppose.
magicians pull them out of a hat, because ba-bam, there's the bunny.
See, look how
It's all
far
about
we
the
can
And
go.
not only
right?
that, but Steve didn't even say this, but it was a goat egg.
Could have been a goat
A
egg.
goat egg, maybe a sheep egg. I
Well,
don't
there's
know.
debate on that.
There's debate on that. Yeah.
So many.
Goat egg.
Now you know how my mind works. So sad.
Next level chef.
Right.
Cooking
Anyway,
with
moving
goat
on to
eggs.
something a little more, because you guys clearly had this look like,
Michelle.
what?
Michelle, wait,
What are you
there's an egg
talking
left
about?
behind?
I feel like everything that we do to try to help people on the show, Steve just undoes.
I do.
Like in a matter of
Well,
moments.
I want them to know what it is, why they need to have a reason for what it is they believe. So you better be solid in that, because it's a very blurred world.
Questions you never thought you could ask in church.
Yeah.
What's going through
Yeah.
Steve's mind up there while
Yeah.
he's playing?
You know what I love about those, Steve? What I absolutely love about it
Yeah.
is what's sad is it seems like so much religious speculation and theory that is actually out there is really nothing more than what you just
Right.
did. Someone just coming up with something that's either funny, sarcastic, or sounds good to them, or ties things together, all these loose ends in some nonsensical
works.
way.
But now it makes
And-
sense why you
yeah.
pull him out of a hat. That's the resurrection. Right?
For no other reason, because we have to be able to put this to something as far as why we're out there looking for eggs filled with candy that came from a bunny.
When did that start?
Well, that's my point.
It was
Well, honestly, a lot of theory is that a lot of that egg imagery, it actually comes out of more of the pagan practices around the fertility worship of Astore and other people like that. And I don't know enough to go much deeper than that, but I've seen that brought up a number of times. Just like Yule logs and Christmas trees have their own pagan origins and were adopted by Christians into just, life practice on the holiday, right?
It feels like Christians haven't co-opted anything in a while.
We need to it's time to co-opt something.
I don't know what.
All right.
We've done trees. We've done eggs. We've done
All right.
bunnies.
Anybody has any ideas?
We've done bread.
Well,
and
sure.
wine. We've done swimming, baptism. We took that over. So what's next?
Honestly, I think if we could look from God's perspective, we'd be insanely blown away at how much stuff that we've co-opted without realizing it.
True.
Yeah.
The Super Bowl now. We took that over. The one commercial.
Sure, he gets us. Yeah,
he gets us.
We actually have a lot of Facebook comments today.
Yeah.
So give a couple shout outs to people.
Yeah.
I saw one earlier, something about the shirt that you're wearing, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, you're wearing the pilgrimage shirt. Did you walk?
Walked from my car into the studio today. Thanks for noticing. I didn't wear this on Sunday because I didn't earn it. I didn't walk. I blew up my back a couple weeks ago, and I'm still kind of on.
I didn't either.
I
didn't do it.
I wore a shirt, but I also did not walk.
But I'm glad you wore a shirt for Palm Sunday.
I did wear a green
two
jacket.
shirts on, yeah.
I wore a green jacket.
Did you?
Well, I mean, it's palms. Right?
It's Palms. I see. I had St. Patrick's Day in my mind.
I thought you were just late for St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, gotta do better than that.
Yeah, but shout out to Tina, shout out to Chris, Kelly, Michelle. Thank you for joining us here online today. Glad to have you with us for Trinity and Jen. We got Jen back with us today. Great to have you with us. And
Michelle says, "Wait, there's an egg left behind." Yes, there was, Michelle.
The new series.
It's in the footnotes in the message.
The left down.
So I'm looking forward to this. But this Sunday we're we're doing Egg Your Neighbor is part of our Easter celebration. I
was hoping you would lead into that from my story.
Yeah,
I was trying to set you up.
Yeah. Good setup. Good setup. We're in sync here, Steve. We're in sync.
Yeah.
Egg your neighbor in a completely legal, non-destructive way.
So tell me about Egg Your Neighbor. What's
you got to
happening?
come. You got to come.
I probably won't be there. But...
Shoot. It's a big one too.
Two of them. Actually, three of them.
Needed it off,
We'll just sit there and hum.
Yeah, right.
Or wait.
All right. Well, we have one more. Maybe Chris. It could be an Easter question. I don't.
We'll make anything an Easter question.
I don't know if this is a sincere question or sarcasm.
Okay.
So I'll explain afterwards. Wondering if you know if it is a myth or there's some truth about a village that is a suburb of Jerusalem. I once read that in the town of Hebron, suburb of Jerusalem has a tomb. In the tomb is the remains of the bodies of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Have you heard of it? And is it true?
Well, hold on.
Go. Okay.
I do think this is actually correct because we're seeing it today. There is a place, a suburb. You could say Chicago is kind of like Jerusalem, right?
Sure.
So a suburb, which could be Hebron, the actual Hebron, but the tomb actually looks like a water tower that has a basketball on top of it. But that actually,
strangely, has like 1952
right
on it.
So the basketball was rolled away,
right?
And there's a bunny inside.
And there is a bunny inside sitting on an egg that has delicacies in it.
So for those who don't know, Hebron is a town outside of Chicago.
Very small town, about an hour and a half outside of Chicago, up on the Wisconsin border. I happen to live outside of that town, hence why someone might be doing this. But no, it is named after Hebron in the Middle East.
Okay.
And there is a small town called Hebron outside of Jerusalem, and it actually has a lot of biblical importance. Hence why you'll find towns throughout the United States. There's a Hebron, Indiana, and I'm sure there's other Hebrons as well. I've noticed.
Nebraska.
Hebron, Nebraska. Yes. What is it with Midwest towns that they all
Small
borrowed
town.
the exact same names? Yeah. There's like 18 Springfields. There's all these Decaturs. There's Hebrons all over the place.
Eagle.
But it's being named after a biblical town. And this was the place of, like the question asker asks, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, possibly Joseph's bones buried there as well later on. Now, I don't think anyone knows where the actual tomb is. I'm sure if you go there today, there's places purporting to be that original tomb. I always get a little skeptical on some of that stuff. But yeah, this is the place where, Abraham and Sarah and all them were buried. So
the bigger question I have
legit.
Is, are they all buried in one tomb?
Probably, because as you read Genesis, it was a family tomb. And then you're going, how does that work, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're
a long
wondering.
time between Abram and Joseph.
Yeah. And so this is even, let me fast forward a little bit, because burial practices are not the same in every culture and every day and generation. So let me just fast forward to the time of Jesus. And this is a really cool archaeological find, but not in the too distant past, maybe the last 5, arguably most 10 years, I want to say. They actually found the burial box of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that you'll see mentioned in the gospel stories. And you're like, what's a burial box? Well, this is what they would do. Think of the story of Jesus, right? He died. They wrap him in these burial cloths and these ointments, right? These spices, and then they lay him in a tomb. And you think that's the end of the story, but it's not for most people, because what you would do is about a year later, you would come back and everything would be basically rotten away to bones. And then you would collect those bones and you would put them in what's called an ossuary or an ossuary. And it's basically like this burial box. Think like a giant urn, but a box. And it's not ashes, but you'd put bones in it. And you'd put the person's bones in it. And then you'd kind of shelve it up on the wall in the tomb. And the tomb is available for use for more bodies. And you would just do your whole family that way. And, you know,
like my literal nightmare.
But think about it this way. How many people do cremation? And maybe instead of spreading the ashes, you're just continuing to bury those ashes in the same place that family members before you have been buried. Doesn't feel as creepy that way. Maybe slightly less creepy, right? Yeah.
That's probably where we're heading anyway. I mean, we're running out of space, right?
I don't know, man. I've been to Nebraska. It's pretty wide open.
It is, but you can't just start, planting people in cornfields and tilling them. I suppose you could.
I suppose you could. Why couldn't you?
But how are you going to visit them again?
Does anyone visit?
The next year they're going to be beans.
Does anyone visit?
Then you can eat it. It's the circle of life.
I add so much this show.
So much value. I don't know who's defining value, but so much value that you bring. Let's see. One about Lutherans specifically.
Ooh.
Feels good for this show. Feels like a good topic.
Lutherans.
What do the Protestants say, especially the Lutherans, about what happens to our soul in the time between when we die and the second coming of Christ? The Catholic Church says we go to purgatory where our sins keep us, while prayers can lessen our time there. What are pastors' thoughts on the concept of purgatory?
Okay, so there's a lot here.
Yeah.
And let me start with where there is agreement, and then I will give the different roads and interpretive paths for you. Everyone believes in the concept of purgatory, not necessarily as a place, though, because purgatory is basically the idea of purgation, that we need to be purged. That's all purgatory means, purging. All right. And there's an idea that all of us are tainted with sin, and all of us need to be purged or cleansed, if you will, by God or purified by God in some way. There's no debate over that. The debate is over how, where, and when. Within Catholic theology, if you are saved, not really language that they would use too much, but it works. If you are going to go to heaven, if you are in Christ, if you are under the grace of Christ, so to speak, the belief is that for most people, you will be purged in a state of being before Christ returns. It doesn't even have to be a place. We often think in terms of place, but you will undergo a purgation process before Christ returns, before you go into heaven. So it's important to understand this in Catholicism, that if you are going to hell, you don't go to purgatory. You just go to hell. Purgatory is only for those who are going to go to heaven or be in the full, what they would call beatific vision of God someday. And this is just the process of being purged before it happens. And yes, in Catholic theology, they'll say that you can pray for people in purgatory and let your merits count towards them and help them along the process of their purgation and things like that. Protestants have historically rejected that by and far. Protestants have said, yes, there is a purgation that needs to happen, but that purgation happens basically the moment we come face to face with Christ. So that when we die, we are brought into Christ's care, and that purgation of our sin has happened already. And certainly when Christ comes again, it's like a flash fire purifying, if you want to think about it that way. If you need an image or a metaphor or something like that, it's you changed, you transformed. You don't have to go through days and days or weeks and weeks or months or eons and eons of time of having it purged. So that's what it's rooted in. And those are some of the different beliefs about it. Basically, what I'll do is sum this up as going, I believe, because they asked me, that if you are in Christ, when you die, you go to heaven. When Christ comes again, your body will be raised, your soul and body will be united, and you will live in eternity in the new heavens, new earth with him. All right?
Which I think some people would have the idea that you die, and then we have to wait till Judgment Day. And on Judgment Day, then you find out whether or not you're going to heaven or hell.
Yeah, right? And that's a messed up version of it. Right. Yeah, you know before Judgment Day what's going to happen. I kind of like to re-spool Judgment Day. How would it change your thinking about it if we didn't call it Judgment Day, but we called it Reward Day?
Props Day.
Props Day.
Like, nice job, Ken. I loved what you did on this. Like, this was perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, you're finally going to get the rewards.
Right.
You know, for what you did and how you lived and what God wants to bestow and honor
biblical.
You with. Yeah, it was absolutely biblical.
So it's we're going to receive rewards.
But doesn't it change your entire perception of what that day is about if you just use a different word?
Yeah.
So then I guess a question from that would be, would non-believers go through Judgment Day or no?
Oh, everyone goes to Judgment Day, but you know,
not everybody gets there.
What I'm doing is judgment has a very negative connotation. So you always think about it in terms of bad. So what's it mean for a believer?
Yeah.
Well, I've just cast it in terms of being good, which then brings up the equal and opposite question of, well, what happens to the unbeliever, right?
You get no reward.
And you get your quote reward, you know, or your wage, you know, what you've earned. Right? The wages of sin is death. You finally inherit or are paid for what you have worked towards.
Should we worry if he's laughing when we get there?
Kind of depends on the laugh, wouldn't you say? Right?
Jubilation, terror, yeah. One thing I had, a question came up as you were answering that last one, that hell is immediate. What happens after the second?
Well, just possibly like Easter, hell is an Anglo-Saxon word.
Yes.
So
Right.
I'm not going to let you use the word hell.
Okay. I would say in lieu of purgatory, then you said believers go to heaven, unbelievers go to hell until Judgment Day when there's the new heavens and the new earth. Is there a new hell then? Or concept of hell?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Does that also get recreated, if you will?
I mean, and again, we're talking about a symbolic book here, but Revelation literally says that hell or Hades gets thrown into the lake of fire.
Okay.
So while there's a recreation of heaven, so to speak, there does seem to be an eternal but recreated version, however we're supposed to understand it, of eternal punishment and judgment as well. And most people see it as an eternal conscious state of some kind. There are some who go, no, maybe it's figurative for just like annihilation, you cease to exist or something like that. And I don't want to get into that too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there's this idea that there is a state of being in which we will exist before Judgment Day. And that state of being, for those of us who have died, is separated from our bodies, right? You are disembodied. 2 Corinthians 5 will actually use a metaphor to describe you as being naked. You're no longer clothed in your body and you're waiting to get some clothes again. The Protestant perspective, though, in that state is that it is good, it is bliss, it is better by far. It is what we can call heaven in the general sense of the way that we use the term.
Yeah.
But the mistake a lot of Christians and non-Christians make is they think that's the final state, which biblically it's not. The final state is a resurrection. And yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so the flip side to that would be the negative state of being for those who are not in Christ, but also waiting for a resurrection and the final, shall we say, rewards and quotes of Judgment Day. Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right. Good question.
Let's see. What's the difference between man before the flood and man after the flood? Jesus grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. Genesis 6:5 verses 6.
Yeah, and actually the question asker plugged it here. Thanks for the question, Gene. The nature of your question, I'm getting the sense is you're wondering if there's something substantially different between a pre-flood person and a post-flood person, and probably not as substantial as you think. There is a field of theology called biblical anthropology. Anthropology, we all know what this field is. It's how do you understand like what humans are, right? And biblical anthropology will look at basically 4 different stages of humanity in God's scheme: before the fall, after the fall, after Christ's first coming, and then after Christ's second coming. There is certainly a continuity between what it means to be human in all 4 of those stages, but there does seem to be distinctions or also discontinuities between what a perfect pre-fall human is like versus one corrupted by sin after the fall. That seems like a no-brainer to us, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's also arguable to say that when you're being reborn in the Holy Spirit, there's also going to be something substantially different in someone's soul, and someone's being of what it means to be human in that new life in Christ now, right? And we know that that's not brought to completion yet, and that at the resurrection, we're going to be transformed in some new kind of way. Still a continuity with who we are, but something different then. So I would encourage you, Gene, to think about the differences in humanity in those 4 blocks more than pre-fall and post-fall. There doesn't really seem to be a difference between, pre-flood and post-flood. Humanity pre-flood and humanity post-flood is really the same kind of humanity. Noah and his family was simply chosen because they were viewed to be more righteous than other people, but still the same kind of fundamental people, just to have chosen God and lived differently. Yeah.
I read an article the other day that their idea was that it was Adam and Eve's DNA that was a breakdown in the DNA, that they had a gene in there that was the sinful gene. And so therefore that's why we've inherited sin still to this day. So,
yeah. I mean, I like that, but I think it stops too far short.
I would agree.
Because I don't think it's about isolating the sin gene, but rather all of our genes have become corrupt, that our entire essence has been corrupt and fallen. That's why they call it the fall. We are far less than what God made us to be as human beings because of the corruption that's overtaken us in every conceivable way. And that's actually what the reformers mean by the term total depravity. It doesn't mean that you are completely 100% evil. It means that every aspect of you has become depraved in some way, or corrupt in some way.
Has the potential for.
Well, not only the potential, but is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I am not in any conceivable way untainted by sin. Yeah. My mind, my will, my emotions, my body, my faith. Right. Yeah. Great question.
We had, I don't remember how this came up. Oh, I think when we were studying in Ecclesiastes, and I don't remember exactly what the concept was, but as we were just talking about, like every aspect of us is tainted by sin or destructive or evil or all of that. What came out in Ecclesiastes was the idea that there can be no good apart from God, or I don't even remember if that was specifically.
Yeah, you'd have to give a chapter and verse on that. I'm curious what you're referring to.
But I think that's a concept that we hear a lot in church. Like, we can do nothing good without God. There isn't any good without God. Humans are only capable of evil apart from God. So I guess wondering what your thoughts are on that in regards to saying that our entire self is tainted by sin. Does that remove the capacity for good, or Yeah,
it's kind of like that literally is the big
from.
theological debate.
Yeah,
because I'll tell you what I think, but I don't want to make one position representative for all Christianity. Like Catholicism, for example, says no, there is a capacity for good. We all are dependent on God's grace in some level, but there is a capacity for good, and you can recognize good for what good is. Luther, Calvin, more of those kind of reform movements. They were very reactionary against that. They were very they would talk in these hyperbolic ways, these big ways of going, without God there is no good. Without God it's impossible to do good. Without God, well, at some level I actually agree with them. I think we're completely dependent on God, but I think it gets misconstrued to think that I sit around passively and until God kind of like zaps me, animates me, or makes me do something, that I don't have capacity to do something good. I also think it's a little binary to talk about good and evil. I do believe that everything that we do that is good is tainted in some level by sin, so that no one ever does 100% good. But at some level, it's just unhelpful to talk that way. Any fool can recognize what's good and what's evil without having to get 90 miles deep into it, sifting every nuance and motive, going, well, was it completely good? Was every motive pure? No, of course not. But we can still look at something and going, that was good. That was not.
Yeah. And that was, I think, one of the things that we remembered after the fact, that Ecclesiastes is largely written in poetry form. So it is using some of those extreme examples and that extreme language of nothing and never and always and those types of things. So it was like, okay, yeah, is this how it's worded to kind of make a point versus like the exact wording?
And I'd love to see what passages you're thinking about. But one of the biggest misunderstandings in Ecclesiastes is the key refrain. And the key refrain is often translated meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And if that's what your translation is doing, I encourage you to look at some other translations. The Hebrew word behind it is pronounced hevel. And it's actually the same word where Abel, you could hear Abel, Hevel, kind of, sort of, that's what his name means. And it doesn't mean so much like meaningless as much as it means like mist-like, temporary, transient. It's the idea of like smoke going up. It's just, you see it, it's there, but it just kind of blows away. There's nothing of substance here. There's nothing of lasting value here. There's nothing of permanency here. And so it's hevel. Everything is hevel. That everything without God is at some level temporary, transient, like trying to grasp at smoke. It just kind of slips through your fingertips, whether that be wealth or whether that be notoriety, or whether that mean success, or whether that be happiness, or whether that be pleasure. It's all just kind of, you could see where they get the meaningless idea, but it's taking it a little too far.
Yeah.
And I think it brings up some...
I found the verses here that brought this up. It's chapter 224. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? So that idea of without God, who can find enjoyment in anything? Who can find joy in anything? Who can... I think we extrapolated it out to do good or find anything good in life. And that was kind of that idea of, okay, is this talking about in extremes to get the point across? Because someone without God can enjoy something in their life. Like that is
absolutely
possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, the point that the writer of Ecclesiastes is making, traditionally ascribed to Solomon, but who knows, is fundamentally, let's put ourselves in Solomon's shoes. Let's say it's Solomon, just for the sake of argument. Here he is. He has got wealth beyond belief. He's got success beyond belief. He's got power beyond belief. He's got the blessing of God upon him in every material way. He has been given wisdom by God in every conceivable way. And he's looking at it all and realizing it's all temporary. It's all here today, gone tomorrow. And it doesn't mean it's bad, but what he does is he kind of goes through all of these aspects of life, making this comment going, we slave and we work and we toil for this. And at the end of the day, What does it produce? But then on the other hand, he goes, all we do is eat and drink and be merry. And yet what good comes from that as well? And what it leads you to is a realization that in life, in this world, in reality, without God, everything is temporary. Everything that people chase after in life. Yeah, it may bring you pleasure for a moment. It may bring you meaning for a moment. But without God, it's hevel. It just disappears. The only place you will find lasting permanency, and with it, the joy that God brings, is fundamentally in him.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great question.
I said I wanted to get to this one in last week. Steve wasn't here. The week before that, you weren't here. So I think quick discussion altogether.
Mm-hmm.
It says this is a question more for Steve. Do you think that marijuana is a gateway
drug? I know you guys did this a couple weeks ago, right?
Do you think that people try it and then it escalates to try even worse and stronger things like cocaine or fentanyl? And what would be your advice to young adults regarding trying some of these things?
I loved listening to you guys navigate this. This was 2 weeks ago, I want to say. Yeah, it was cool hearing your story, and just thanks for putting it out on the line. And I know you do that, but yeah. So what did you want to reopen on this?
If you had any thoughts, any additions to add, anything else like that? We have like 4 minutes.
They sent in, they didn't like my answer. So they're like, can you give a more holy answer?
Yeah, they're like, we want God's answer. So,
well, then let me go ahead and answer this for you. I got a direct line.
Yeah. Apologize for my answer. I was high.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I loved how you answered this, Steve, and I think you're spot on. Here's the question. Do you think marijuana is a gateway drug? It could be, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is.
Yeah.
And it's like so many other things in this world. What has the capacity to derail one does not necessarily derail another. At some fundamental level, marijuana is a gift of God. It's part of his creation, and it can be used to his glory. The problem of sin is what it does is it takes gifts of God and it abuses them. It distorts them. It uses them to false ends. It does evil with them. And do people do that with marijuana? You better believe people do that with marijuana. Does everyone do that with marijuana? No way. No way. So marijuana isn't the issue. It's what you do with it, what it causes you to do, what it leads you to do. And then, as Jesus would say, being aware of where your propensities to sin are in life. And if you have those propensity, avoiding them at all costs.
Yeah.
So
I think we bring that up because we're afraid of the word addiction, and we don't fully understand addiction. As we said earlier in the show, we get scared of things that we don't know. Right. And addiction is a horrible disease that a lot of things are coming out now. We're starting to understand better, but you and I could go to a party and smoke a bong, and you go home and you're like, well, that was weird. All right. And I'm like, woo, I need more, because all of a sudden I'm addicted. People do that with alcohol. They do it with, cocaine, whatever. People get a gateway drug prescribed to them that leads to heroin use. So saying a gateway is marijuana a gateway drug? It all depends on the person and if they have the propensity for addiction, I think. And because I've known a lot of people who, hey, not a problem. And I've known a lot of people who are, big problem.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So I think that the true question is, what we're trying to steer away from is addiction. And, you just don't know what's going to trip somebody up.
I also would add to that too, that as far as you mentioned, like prescription drugs, I know people that are on prescription drugs that probably don't even need to be on prescription drugs, but is it having an effect on them physically, mentally? Yeah, for sure. Is there also a placebo effect that it's really not necessarily medicating what they want it to, but it's making them feel like, well, as long as I take this, I'm going to be okay. There's another point to this, So, by the way, going back to smoking a bong, you don't smoke a bong.
I know.
You hit the bong.
You hit it.
just in case you're at a party and someone asks you, like, you want to hit this? Don't actually punch it.
And of course,
you're not going to be the favorite person at the party anymore.
And of course, the number one pusher over at Fellowship of Faith, Melinda Putnam, says a cookie's a gateway drug.
Well, but you know, and this is the thing. I think we've done a better job of expanding our idea of addiction beyond like alcohol and nicotine and drugs. Yeah. We've started to understand things like gambling and porn and maybe even shopping a little bit.
Yep.
But you think of the amount of people,
work, intelligence, anything taken to an extreme.
Exactly. The amount of people who are food addicts or sugar addicts or carb addicts or whatever you want to call them. The amount of people that are caffeine addicts. And it's viewed as being socially acceptable because the immediate effect is not something like a drug that is either going to hospitalize you or put you into an altered state. But like caffeine, it makes you more productive. Right. So, okay, that's a good one. But anytime you're enslaving yourself to something, you are fundamentally walking away from what God desires. God is a God of freedom. And to enslave ourselves to the things of this world is fundamentally spiritually dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, we've hit the end of the show, and we've actually gotten through a lot of our inbox here today. There's never existed a time in humanity that we've gotten through the entire inbox, and if we haven't gotten through it, we will get to it on next shows. But hey, a couple of things before we break. First, thanks for listening. Second, remember, you can catch past episodes on your favorite podcast provider, Spotify, Apple, whatever it happens to be. Just search for questions you never thought you could ask in church. Number 3, visit us at fellowshipoffaith.org. Again, fellowshipoffaith.org. Visit our FOF Plus page. You can find this and other video and audio archives that we have available there if they're beneficial to you. Fourth, if you don't have a church home and you're looking for a place to worship this season, there is no better time and date to start than Easter Sunday. So I just kind of want to encourage you that you find a church, you choose to worship with a body. Maybe you've been out of church for a long time. Give it a chance again. Find a good place in your area and connect. And if you're up in the area of McHenry, Illinois, maybe with Fellowship of Faith, you could find us at fellowshipoffaith.org. Again, you can text your questions in 24/7 to 815-314-0363. Again, 815-314-0363. God's blessings to you. May the death, the resurrection of Jesus transform your life. May you come to understand it. May you come to believe it. May you come to find life in it and life in Him. God bless. We'll catch you next time.